Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I need to say welcome to our invited guests who are specially flown in to be at this seminar in order for them to be more aware of the fairly complex story about the palm oil industry. These are our buyers who are here in Kuala Lumpur, and I need our local friends to also help welcome them while they are in Kuala Lumpur for this occasion, because this is one effort to facilitate trade. But my topic, Malaysian palm oil assuring sustainable supply of oils and fats into the future, will give that added assurance to our buyers that we are here to stay, we are here to assure you that palm oil sustainable supply will be there for you into the future as well. So my presentation will be both basic as well as also a way of explaining the current price predicaments that we are facing as producers. So I will start off looking at the role of palm oil, or what I call palm oil dominance. And this will give you a lot of indication how we have come about and where we'll continue to be. Long-term demand of palm oil is strong, and that is again an assurance to our suppliers that we should continue to put a lot of faith, a lot of investment, a lot of support into this industry. Long-term and short-term strategies. I will introduce this approach, or the various approaches that we are taking. Short-term, for example, how to address recent problems of price declining too sharply. But I also want to introduce the concept of we existing in a duopolistic markets environment. This is a special case of oligopolistic market, where there are few suppliers, but duopolistic simply means there are two main suppliers. And these two main suppliers must know how to manage their activities or their trading in a duopolistic market. But look at the dominance of palm oil again. Every 5 years or so, as reported by Oil World here, we see about a 20 million tons increment in demand, or for that matter, supply of oils and fats. So it's not about to reduce drastically or whatever being pessimistic view that could be attributed to this trend, because it's still growing. And this is, of course, later on linked to population and so on. If you look at how we were 20 years ago, a smaller pie, with palm oil taking a 13% share of that production. Now it is a bigger pie, palm oil taking more than double share within those 20 years. And in the export is even a more, let's say, aggressive picture of palm oil playing a more dominant role, moving from 36% share in the 20 years ago to 57% share. This, to me, is important, because you are seeing a trend that is not about to reverse. And if you look at other factors, like some of the other oils being used more and more for mandatory biodiesel use, then you can imagine that the export availability will even be less going forward. And of course, to know a little bit of how palm oil is used, all the applications, still 80% is food. So don't forget, we are in the food business. Oleochemicals take up 15%. Biofuel at the moment is not too big, and that is an issue because we are fighting market access into the EU and US for biodiesel export. But if those market restrictions are removed, obviously there will be more opportunity or bigger percentage of palm oil to be used for biofuel. But that is not the end of the story, because our industry, 5 million hectares of oil palm plantations, create a lot of biomass. Up to now, only the palm oil, palm kernel oil are the two biomass components exploited commercially in a big way, and making up maybe 10–12% of the total biomass produced. The other 90% of the biomass is still unutilized commercially in a big way. So this is how the Minister, Mr. Idris Jalal, has presented that there are opportunities for advanced biofuel development, use more of this biomass for generating perhaps an equal amount of income from the palm oil industry, which already charts a 80 billion ringgit worth of revenue per year. So I keep updating this chart and representing it to the customers here, because on the left side, the blue lines are those net importing our oil, of oils and fats, and these are most likely the countries with chronic shortages of oils and fats. The EU, for example, have been importing something like 8 million tons net imports every year. So even if they go on a big biodiesel program, it does not make sense, because where are they going to get this additional oil to do their biodiesel program? So lately we have heard the EU wanting to tone down their biofuel biodiesel program from 10% transport use to 5%. This is simply because they find it difficult to make ends meet. If you are net importing and you want a big biodiesel program going forward, you have to create that kind of available oil, and being a net importer does not make it easy. On the right-hand side, Malaysia, Indonesia, we are about the only two countries with plenty of excess oil to export, and that's why we have that 15 to 20 million tons of excess oil that we export, net export to the rest of the world. And Brazil used to have net excess in a bigger way, but because of biofuel mandates, the amount of net export availability has reduced. So will Argentina. So we are therefore coming to see these palm oil suppliers, Malaysia, Indonesia, and this is the duopolistic market that I mentioned. There are only two suppliers where the oil net importers are going to seek their oil in the future. The world population, long-term demand for palm oil will be driven by world population growth. You can read this detail. It will be published in our website for downloading for your own use later on. Cropland area is getting less and less on a per capita trend basis, because more population, same land area, we have to share less and less land resource to produce all our crops and our requirements. And here comes the hunger map of the UN, showing in very deep red color those countries, which you may not be able to read, with 35% undernourished status. So we want to help these countries by planting oil palm, because Malaysia, as you can see, is the only Asian country, outside those like Japan and Korea, where we are in blue. We are not having big undernourished population status, less than 5%, like the rest of the countries in blue. So the fact that we have palm oil in Malaysia, we are able to feed ourselves using the money to buy more food materials. In other words, we become able to afford so that we are not categorized in this malnourished. And the key is oil palm generates enough revenue and enough edible oil to do that. And when we suggest to plant oil palm in Congo and all these other African countries in deep red color, which is suffering from malnutrition, undernourished status, 35% and above, the NGOs are saying, no, we should not do that, because that will destroy the forest. So what it means is that we keep this population undernourished, underfunded, they can't buy enough food, can't produce enough food. If that is the wish of the NGOs and the world, I think we are not the affected party. These African countries will be affected for not being allowed to develop their land resource. If you look at Europe and America, they have developed the land resource to become very rich and able to produce their own food and make good income and buy other things as well. So this current strategy of no deforestation has got some impacts like that, which I leave you to think hard. But why do we offer oil palm? Oil palm is so productive and so efficient in land use. You can see that this bar chart, the byproduct of the oil palm industry, the palm kernel oil yield alone, is equivalent to the oil yield of the other oilseed crops like sunflower or soybean. In fact, we can fight off this yield battle just by producing our palm kernel oil alone, you know. And then we have this green bar, almost 3.68 tons more bonus oil that we get per hectare per year producing palm oil. So that's how we are competitive and efficient in terms of land use. We don't need to cut forests because we save 10 times more forests compared to those producing other oils, rapeseed, and so on. And if you look on the right, we are already 11 times more productive. Those of you who like to do comparison, include the palm kernel oil because that is part of the production yield. So we are 11 times more productive per hectare per year than soya. And that is before we introduce this concept with the minister presented, doubling the yield or increasing the yield by another 30%, which will make this 11 times to be maybe 20 times, 15 to 20 times more high yielding than soybean or sunflower. So this is the natural choice for investment to feed the world, to raise the economic income of poor countries like the one shown in Africa, so that they are out of the poverty trap. Just like we have done for Malaysia. And why can't we duplicate that more liberally in other countries where they need this type of development? And they have the land asset. They have enough forests to keep for biodiversity. And yet, their land assets are not allowed or not encouraged to be developed, sometimes by campaigners who are more trying to protect climate change from happening. Okay, so if we continue to look at the trends again, there can be pessimistic trends being presented, but if you look at the export, net export trends here, the export trend itself, the combined exports of soya, rapeseed, sun oil in blue is not even half the export of palm oil. So those countries in need of oil, they need to import. They have to look at palm oil again because this is the main form of available oil out there in the market. Because you can't really rely on soya, rapeseed, and sun. That itself is dipping down, especially last year when they were hit by droughts or hit by mandatory biofuel use. So I just give you backup figures, those who want to go into detail, how much more land if you were to project the future increase in demand, there will be a need to have maybe 2.5 million tons more palm oil. But if you were to produce that, from Malaysian palm, it doesn't require that much land. But if you want to meet that demand by additional soya production, then you will have to have 10 times more land. But again, those in the biofuel business are pessimistic or optimistic that they will continue to increase the biofuel or biodiesel volume going forward 10, 20 years from now. And then again, this is the sort of demand that will trigger the palm oil industry to continue to look forward to supply the total global need, which is expanding. And this is expanding because, like it or not, the green chart here, the one in green, is the crude oil target production going into 2040 and so on. And it's not going to increase like it was in the 1980s or 70s. However much new technology, fracking technology, fuel oil or crude oil is a non-renewable resource. Once the oil is dry, it's dry. So You can supplement it with gas and so on. This will lengthen this availability somewhat. But some of the prediction about future development in oil has to take into account that the supply is going to decrease in the future. It may not be 5 years, cannot be 10 years, it could be 15 years or thereabout. So that's where the palm oil story continues to warm us in the sense that we are there to help supplement or complement the shortages even in the fossil fuel market. And you look at how the biodiesel mandates are forcing the one in blue, export of soya to be static in terms of growth. Because more and more in red color, fuel mandates are consuming the available soya. And therefore, this chart shows that even though the biofuel industry is not expanding so much from year to year here, but even though the biofuel industry is still expanding in red, the export of soya is affected. In that sense, it is level in blue. And the one in food use for soya is coming down. And that's where palm has to take the place of lack of soya for the food industry. Like in America, we are exporting more than 1 million tons of palm oil now because soya is diverted for biodiesel use. So the EU biodiesel expansion is shown. I'm coming to world balance in supply and demand for oils and fats, updated every few months or weeks. And we are seeing the figure for 2012. What we have said recently or at our pointer seminar in recent past is that the world has been not able to replenish stock. As you can see here, stock usage ratio has been somewhat on the declining trend over the last 3-4 years, and we have not heard of any big supply factor coming to the market. Even Malaysian production is still below par compared to last year's production. So by right, or in theory, if we are talking about price responding to reduced stock usage ratio, price should be the dotted line going upwards. What the gurus of price forecast did earlier in the year, they say price would be in the 3,500-4,000 ringgits per ton. How is it now that we are seeing 2,200 ringgits per ton? So, okay, Mr. Dorab Mistry will explain that all tomorrow, but my explanation, and this is how we are seeing price right now, and you see this on our screen outside the room as well. We are coming to 2.2 on average over the last week, just extrapolating what was the average on an annual basis or month-to-month basis to the average that we see just last week. So it looks alarming, but it's still, long-term, we are probably looking a blip at the price trend because it moves down so fast. And from the food security supply point of view, nothing to worry about. We still have plenty of supply. But I want now to move on to long-term strategies. And from me personally, I look at this industry wanting to assure sustainable supply. And we do it through multi-certification scheme, maybe RSPO, MSPO, etc., all ISCC, all the certification schemes can come about because it's all about trying to introduce or promote, assure sustainable supply coming from Malaysia. Another strategy, obviously, to increase productivity because we have limited land, but we have upside potential to increase productivity yield by another 10 tons per hectare from 20 to 30. I've talked about this in another forum like the local planters seminar and conference. I wouldn't dwell too much about increased productivity efforts here. It's more like something the local producers must talk among themselves how to increase this productivity. But as far as RSPO is concerned, this is RSPO chart that we take from the web, and it is going on very well as planned. We are producing 6 million tons of RSPO certified palm oil, and also palm kernel oil for those in the palm kernel interest in brown. And you can see that sometimes we are faulted for not exporting or not producing RSPO oil, but we are producing. And I was in Australia some time back with the Australian taking us to the parliament, accusing us of deforestation. And I just presented this chart to the Australian. He said, look, you're a developed country, you have less population than us, but according to the UN reports here, you are deforesting at a higher rate than us. Why you want to single out our palm oil for labeling when it is your commodities that you should be addressing first for labeling? So that was the end of their effort to label our palm oil in Australia. But then it cropped up in France recently, so we'll have to chase them up for that as well. But essentially, those who are concerned about deforestation, biodiversity, Malaysian palm oil consumes very little of the World Land Bank or World Forest or whatever. Of course, all land in Malaysia, they were originally forests. We are using 0.09% of world agricultural area to plant our oil palm. That, to me, is not a sin. Even if we double our palm oil plantation, it's still contributing to very little of the land area of the world for agriculture, and therefore very little for carbon greenhouse gas emission as well. Now comes to France, and I keep this slide simply to show you that France has got only 30,000 hectares of, not on the slide, 30,000 hectares of virgin forest. And they're so proud of that. That is 0.06% of their land or something like that. But they do have forests, 29%, as you can see in the brown bar on the third line, third bar. So France has got 29% of their total land area as forest. Malaysia has got double that. But in France, they want to put a new palm oil label, Son palm oil or whatever, palm oil free label on their food products, on the allegation that this is related to deforestation. But I told the French through my blog and Palm Talks article that France has deforested 72% of their land. We have not deforested that much. And again, why should we be penalized with the connotation that we are over deforesting, when it is they, you know, with their vineyard and farms and sunflower, rapeseed, olive. France was not a desert before, it was fully forest too. So why are they taking this step to label us? And those using the greenhouse gas emission, like the EPA is coming to town next week, trying to talk to us to reduce our carbon emission. And this is the kind of chart that I will present to the American EPA officers coming to see us. Look, on the right side, when we were 2000, the forest in green and palm oil plantation in red removed almost 250 million tons of carbon a year. And the total country emission is less, 223 million tons of carbon dioxide. So you can see among the emission, the blue is of course by fossil fuel sector, and we have nothing to do with that. The other emission, factories and methane or whatever, deforestation in yellow, called land use and land use change and forestry emission, combined with the one in purple, is still below 82 million tons absorption by the palm oil plantation sector. In other words, the palm plantation sector is able to remove most of the emissions outside the burning of fossil fuel for the whole country. And we are accused of contributing to climate change. So these mad scientists in the US are looking at one-sided calculation, how to put maximum emission load on the palm oil industry. When you look at the balance between emission and removal, the palm oil industry, just like the forest, it is a remover of CO2, enough to remove almost all the CO2 emitted by all sectors of the country except fossil fuel. And combined with forests, we remove all the emissions altogether. In other words, we are helping the US and others. You know, the US emission is about 7 billion tons of CO2. We are talking about removing, net removal of CO2 here. So anyway, I leave that to further discussion, because all I want to say here is that palm oil is doing such a good work removing CO2 from the atmosphere for the benefit of climate change and the whole world, and yet we are at the receiving end being accused of, latest statement from the web, if you like, palm oil is worse than fossil fuel, you know. So I don't sometimes understand how the NGOs are able to convert scientists to make that kind of statements. Production of sustainable palm oil, of course, we'll continue to do that. RSPO is doing well. I hope there will be more uptake of RSPO certified palm. At the moment, it is very poorly taken up. It is improving, no doubt. But to people like in the French supermarkets doing the no palm oil label, I would say Malaysian responsible palm oil is perhaps one solution. Malaysian deforestation-free palm oil is perhaps another solution, assuring them that through aggregate compliance, all our oil palm plantations are 100% licensed, and therefore we are not involved in deforestation at all. So we are not yet now big in biodiesel, and that can be part of the solution, because we say we are supplying world food requirements, especially for food security purposes. And our land continues to be very efficiently cultivated, because you can see trending here, the ratio of land use to production is getting better and better. In other words, efficiency ratio is improving with increasing yield of palm. So there are two short-term problems that I want to quickly discuss. Got 2 more minutes. Problem number one, this is about managing, as I said, the duopolistic part of the oligopolistic nature of our market, meaning few suppliers or only 2 suppliers. And Indonesian duty structure encourages their exporters to undercut prices in the market. And in a duopolistic market, when you do that, the other party will also reduce price, and you continue doing that until you reach the bottom of the price comfort, that you almost reach to a point like what you are doing now. I warned the Indonesian about 6-7 months ago that we have to manage this duopolistic existence. If you reduce price, we have no choice but to also reduce price or to keep stocks. Both have occurred. We have reduced price and we have kept stock to almost a very high level. And the next statement is, if we mismanage these duopolistic markets, price has now decreased by 1,000 ringgits per metric ton, as you can see, 3.2 to 2.2, and with each country exporting potentially 20 million tons of palm oil products, palm kernel, palm oil together, each 20 million tons. So 1,000 ringgits times 20 million tons, potentially, if it occurs depressed in price for 1 whole year, that will be 20 billion each, Malaysia and Indonesia, value vanishing to thin air. And I call this value destruction. It's not the fault of the Indonesian, because if you have margin to share with the buyer, you share with the buyer. And that is the cause for why we say the duty structure is conducive to price cutting. And the government, having suffered now this price decline down to bottom level where export tax may no longer apply, would probably, if it is persisting for 1 whole year, lose the export tax, lose the corporate tax of 60 billion ringgit revenue that would be accruing if the price is still 1,000 ringgit stronger. So they lose the country's revenue, 20 billion, they lose corporate tax of 5 billion, they lose export tax of another 5 billion. There's a lot of money to be lost. And Malaysia is the collateral damage sufferer in so doing. So what do? Of course, we talk to the Indonesians before we do whatever we want to do. We were there last week with the minister. So Malaysia will reduce its supply by maybe cutting old trees so that we can facilitate our replanting, which is necessary anyway, but we time it to remove excess stock. Malaysia can increase its biodiesel again. There are many ways of doing it, either incentivize the non-transport sector, which is using diesel, and also expand the coverage of current blending 5% to more than the central region. That would take 300,000 tons. There are near-term duty-free quota of palm oil still available, 2.4 million tons available. So by 1st of January, this will be stopped. So obviously, there'll be a lot of opportunity to have cheap CPO or duty-free CPO for export in the next couple of months. So I think Indonesia should also take the same steps because they have as much need to help prevent 20 billion loss of potential revenue. And the lesson learned, this is something that I hope we all share with everybody, unilaterally raising the stake, or in this case, favorable duty structure in Indonesia, or playing a win-lose strategy was a painful mistake. Okay, 20 billion is quite painful. It backfired on a duopoly market, resulting in lose-lose outcome. I mean, if you all remember that and share that with your friends, that's what the textbook will say, how to manage duopoly economy. Problem number 2, we are dealing with RSPO whose NGO partners go around the world saying palm oil is bad. And this is again a duopolistic kind of market. RSPO palm oil and non-RSPO palm oil, to make it simple for you to understand in terms of the duopolistic nature of that supplier market. Just RSPO palm oil, non-RSPO palm oil. If the NGOs go around campaigning negatively on non-RSPO palm oil, they are actually raising a unilateral stake, and it is a mistake. A win-lose strategy, as I said, will backfire and results in a lose-lose outcome for both suppliers. Why? Here you can see they will destroy value, more cost to the producers, and negative campaigns will attract, for example, the French to put no palm oil label. When the French put no palm oil label, even the RSPO palm oil cannot go in. And to me, that is not very smart. So supporters of our RSPO like WWF should actually be the first to fight the French no palm oil label. But somehow or other, they are mute and silent, and I wonder why. So those of you in the business, please do something because the rule of the duopolistic market must be observed. Otherwise, you destroy value and result in a lose-lose situation. Even the best effort in certifying RSPO palm oil does not have a place if the French were to put no palm oil on their product labels. Okay, so I think that is basically my message for today. Of course, we can go on to say that Malaysian palm oil is responsibly produced. It should qualify for deforestation-free type of palm oil. Hopefully, this will be backed up with some certification scheme that would pacify the marketplace like in France and elsewhere. So I leave it to the industry later on to work around this formula. But of course, Malaysia is already well geared or well positioned to achieve that because we are already saying we conserve 50% of our forests, more than what France has done. Our footprint is so small, what I've shown in the chart earlier, so that we have no problem about greenhouse gas if we are serious, scientifically serious about doing a fair assessment. So in conclusion, I think palm oil will continue to be dominant, major source of oil. Palm oil will continue to be attractive because of a land-efficient way through its high yield. That makes sense when arable land is limited. High yield production will continue to increase. This is our actually something up our sleeve. 4 tons per hectare now can go up to 8 tons quite easily. We have a means to do that. So that would continue to make us very competitive. We are having no problems in keeping biodiversity commitment. But finally, I think world supply has not been able to replenish stock for the 3rd year running or 4th year running. But this current softening of demand, which is recognized, and the price distortion that has been incurred to the industry, perhaps by lack of appreciation of our duopolistic nature of the market, I think we should be able to overcome that with all the remedial measures that we have put into place. So those of you who are keen to read more about my arguments, go to my blog, www.ceopalmoil.com. Thank you for your attention.